I never imagined that moving to a quaint suburban community would ignite one of the fiercest legal battles of my career. My name is Natalie Rivers. I'm a humanitarian lawyer with a global reputation, having represented refugees, fought for human rights, and challenged major corporations. Yet, longing for a more peaceful personal life, I chose to settle in the seemingly tranquil haven of Cypress Glade Estates, a place I believed would be calm enough to recharge my spirit when I wasn't in a courtroom. Cypress Glade Estates charmed me from the outset. Picture-perfect lawns, towering cypress trees, a small lake, and well-maintained houses nestled on winding streets. There was an HOA that oversaw basic neighborhood standards, but I assumed it would be mild, covering matters like landscaping and mailbox design. I certainly didn't expect to cross paths with someone so power-hungry that she'd displace elderly residents for personal gain. That someone was a middle-aged woman, rumored to be in her early 50s, known in official HOA documents as Martha Ann Nelson. However, nearly everyone I met in Cypress Glade privately nicknamed her Karen, a testament to her iron-fisted approach to anything she deemed unfit for the neighborhood. She was the de facto HOA czar, rarely allowing other board members to get a word in. Tales swirled about her micromanaging neighbors' flower beds or threatening fines for a single weed poking up in someone's lawn. At first, I chalked it up to typical suburban rumor, but I was about to learn how extreme Karen could get. On my move-in day, a few neighbors offered polite greetings, plus an older couple named the Harises, who lived 2 houses down. They seemed sweet, mid-70s, always smiling, offering me homemade cookies. They told me many seniors resided in the southern section of the neighborhood, having retired to the calm of Cypress Glade. They also spoke in hushed tones about Karen. "She rules this place like her kingdom," Mr. Harris said, shaking his head. "If you cross her, watch out." I didn't see Karen until the next weekend, at an HOA welcome brunch. She stood in the clubhouse, wearing a tailored suit, directing people to sign attendance sheets and pick up copies of community guidelines. Her posture was stiff, her eyes hawk-like. When I introduced myself, she gave me a quick once-over, her lips quirking as if deciding whether I measured up. "Welcome, Ms. Rivers," Karen said. "We're proud of our high standards. I trust you'll maintain them." She offered no small talk or genuine warmth, just a thin-lipped smile. Her air suggested she believed herself superior to these humble residents. I politely nodded, giving no hint of my legal background. I'd learned from experience. Better to let people show their cards before revealing I was a high-profile attorney. That afternoon, I chatted with a few older neighbors. They praised the neighborhood's scenic beauty but bemoaned Karen's strictness. Some said she was obsessed with modernizing the area. Another confided that she once tried to ban bird feeders, claiming they attracted pests. Her real motivation, apparently, was controlling everything in sight. I wondered how far such a controlling personality might go, but I never expected she'd go as far as evicting vulnerable seniors. Over the following weeks, I settled into a pleasant routine, morning jogs around the lake, evenings on my porch reading. Occasionally, I'd see Karen prowling the streets, carrying a clipboard, jotting down violations. She'd leave notices on doors if grass was an inch too long, or if someone's trash can lingered on the curb. It was petty, but not a crisis. Then, in mid-June, rumors spread of something bigger. Karen allegedly wanted to build a grand tennis court and recreation center in the southern part of the neighborhood. Some neighbors shrugged it off. HOAs sometimes add amenities. But then details emerged. She'd targeted a section of old single-story houses, mostly occupied by elderly folks on fixed incomes. The proposal entailed demolishing those homes to clear space for the tennis court, presumably financed by special HOA assessments. Shocked, I asked Ms. Harris if that was even feasible. "They can't do that, can they?" I asked, outraged. Ms. Harris sighed. Karen claims she found a clause in the original development agreement giving the HOA the right to repurpose common areas or acquire necessary land for community improvements. She insists the homes sit on land that can be reclaimed for the association. Mr. Harris shook his head. "It's nonsense. Those seniors own their homes outright." But apparently, Karen was telling the board and city officials that the original developer never properly transferred deeds to certain parcels. If that were true, the seniors might be living on ground that legally belonged to the HOA. A sinking feeling told me this was more than rumor. My legal instincts roared that Karen was orchestrating a major land grab. These older residents might not have the resources to fight back, but I sure did. My next step, quietly investigating property records and preparing for a potential legal showdown. In my professional capacity as a humanitarian lawyer, I'd represented countless marginalized groups, refugees, elderly victims of fraud, families facing unfair evictions. This situation in Cypress Glade felt distressingly familiar. Powerful individuals exploiting legal technicalities to dispossess the vulnerable. However, I needed concrete proof that Karen planned to forcibly remove these seniors. I scoured the public records at the county clerk's office. I discovered that the developer had sold those southern lots individually decades ago. Yet Karen filed a recent petition claiming the HOA retained rights of reclamation for communal recreational development. None of it matched standard property law. But if Karen was persuasive or manipulative enough, the city might issue condemnation orders or side with the HOA. It was all highly suspect. Meanwhile, older residents like the Harises grew anxious. One day, Ms. Harris confided that her friend, an 80-year-old widow named Mrs. Oliver, had received a letter from the HOA's lawyer demanding she vacate her property within 60 days or face legal action. The letter alleged her home sat on land designated as Phase 2 recreational zoning. She was terrified, lacking the funds for a protracted court battle. My blood boiled. I decided it was time to step out of the shadows. I invited the Harises and a few other threatened residents to my living room. Over cups of tea, I explained my background. I was a well-known lawyer who'd taken on massive humanitarian cases. I offered pro bono representation if they agreed. Tears of relief shone in their eyes. They'd been on the brink of despair. I assured them, "We will fight this. Karen can't just steal your homes for a tennis court." I saw renewed hope sparkle in Ms. Harris's eyes. "Thank you, dear," she whispered. "We had no idea we had an ally like you." But I warned them. Karen might have unscrupulous attorneys. "We need to gather evidence of your rightful ownership." Everyone nodded, determined. The tension escalated swiftly. Karen marched to a board meeting with architectural plans for the new tennis court and clubhouse, touting how property values would skyrocket once the old eyesores were removed. She brushed off concerns about displacing seniors. Some board members voiced unease, but her forceful personality dominated the conversation. When Ms. Harris tried to speak on behalf of the threatened neighbors, Karen cut her off, reciting the supposed legal right of the HOA. That's when I rose, calmly introducing myself as Natalie Rivers, ESQ, specializing in land rights and humanitarian law. A ripple of surprise ran through the crowd, and Karen's eyes narrowed. She asked, "Since when does an HOA matter require a high-profile attorney?" I explained, "When it involves forcibly displacing vulnerable elderly residents, it's not a trivial matter." Karen's face flushed. She repeated that the land had never been properly deeded to the seniors. I responded that, based on my preliminary investigation, that claim was unfounded. The board listened, some relieved to see Karen challenged, others confused. Karen tried deflecting, saying, "We'll let the courts decide. Meanwhile, the HOA stands by our plan." The meeting ended in an uproar. Outside, Ms. Harris hugged me tearfully, while neighbors asked if there was real hope. I assured them that we'd file for an injunction if Karen truly attempted demolition. The days of her bullying were numbered, yet I suspected she wouldn't retreat easily. People with that level of arrogance rarely do. Sure enough, Karen's hostility soared. She began distributing official-looking notices around the southern section, giving residents final warnings. She claimed that the HOA had secured building permits, and demolition might begin in a matter of weeks. Panic gripped the seniors. Some of them, frail and lacking family support, worried they'd end up homeless. I sprang into action, forming a small legal team with a few colleagues from my law firm. Pro bono suits were my passion, and I had the resources to handle this. We prepared to file a lawsuit seeking an immediate restraining order against the HOA's plan. Meanwhile, I needed direct evidence of each homeowner's rightful title. Many older residents rummaged through old boxes, producing dusty deeds, decades-old mortgage records, anything proving they'd purchased their land. We helped them organize these documents meticulously. On a parallel track, Karen tried to expedite city approvals for demolition. She had a cunning strategy. claim the HOA owned that land, and present the new tennis court as a public amenity. Some city officials might be swayed, believing it was just improving the neighborhood. I reached out to the city council, explaining the injustice. The response was cautious. Some council members worried about tangling with the HOA or facing legal complexities. The day we filed our injunction in county court, word spread fast. The local newspaper covered the story. HOA's tennis court plan spurs legal showdown over elderly residents' homes. People were outraged. Many living in Cypress Glade, who had previously been passive, rallied behind the threatened seniors. On social media, neighbors called out Karen's plan as heartless. Meanwhile, she stuck to her mantra that the tennis court was for the greater good. A hearing was set for the injunction. If we prevailed, the HOA couldn't proceed with demolition until a full trial resolved property ownership. If we lost, bulldozers might roll in within days. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The preliminary injunction hearing took place in a packed courtroom. Dozens of concerned neighbors attended, plus local media. My legal team stood beside the seniors, brandishing their rightful deeds and affidavits. Karen arrived flanked by two lawyers, sporting a smug expression as if certain she'd crush us with supposed technicalities. Judge McCloskey presided over the case. First, Karen's side argued that the original developer's contract reserved the right for future community amenities on certain southern lots. They displayed old, grainy documents referencing a Phase 2 that might become recreational space. However, these documents lacked clarity and never named the specific lots or reversed the sales to homeowners. It was a bizarre, partial blueprint that was never officially recorded. Then we presented the actual titles and local property records, showing these seniors had been paying taxes and living there for decades. We pointed to the state laws preventing HOAs from simply seizing privately owned homes without due process or eminent domain authority, which they clearly lacked. The judge listened carefully, flipping through the evidence. Karen's lawyers tried to sow confusion, claiming some records had gaps. But the seniors' consistent property tax payments, recognized addresses, and official deeds were robust proof. After hours of argument, the judge frowned at Karen's side. It appears the HOA's claim is, at best, unsubstantiated. This court will not allow demolition to proceed absent a thorough trial on merits. A hush fell. Then the judge granted our request for a temporary injunction, halting any attempt to remove the homeowners. Applause and cheers erupted in the gallery. Karen's face turned pale. Outside, Ms. Harris sobbed with relief, hugging me. The local press interviewed me on the courthouse steps, where I explained the importance of safeguarding seniors from forced displacement. Karen slunk away, ignoring reporters. She'd lost the first round, but the war wasn't over. A full trial loomed, possibly months away. Still, we'd gained a vital reprieve. With the injunction in place, the threatened seniors breathed easier. The HOA couldn't legally bulldoze their houses without risking contempt of court. Karen seethed. She filed motions to expedite the trial, presumably hoping to bury us in legal fees or find a sympathetic judge. I responded by gathering more evidence. The older neighbors found old closing statements and correspondences from the developer, all stating that the southern lots had been sold outright. Meanwhile, the media spotlight intensified. People outside Cypress Glade recognized me from high-profile humanitarian cases. They found it shocking that I was battling an HOA official who felt entitled to demolish elderly homes for a tennis court. The negative coverage hammered Karen's reputation. Some from the board tried to distance themselves, claiming they never intended to displace seniors. But Karen had steamrolled them, and now they faced the backlash. At a subsequent HOA meeting, Karen attempted to rally supporters, insisting that if they lost the trial, property values will stagnate. But the momentum had shifted. Many residents realized this fiasco threatened the entire neighborhood's image. Ms. Whitley, a moderate board member, publicly apologized to the seniors, vowing the board would find alternative ways to add amenities that didn't involve displacing anyone. Furious, Karen threatened to remove Ms. Whitley from the board, but she lacked the votes. Her iron grip was slipping. Still, Karen refused to surrender. Word leaked that she was meeting with wealthy developers, searching for ways to finance the tennis project or even sell the disputed land to a private company for luxury expansions. The sense of foreboding returned. If she found enough backing, who knew what legal contortions might follow. We pressed on, preparing for the trial with renewed determination. Trial day arrived in a swirl of tension. The county courthouse was abuzz, with reporters, supporters of the seniors, and some curious onlookers who'd been following the drama. Karen's legal team took seats on one side, looking stern. I sat with Ms. Harris, Mrs. Oliver, and a handful of other elderly plaintiffs, ensuring them we had a solid case. For 2 days, the court heard testimony. Karen's side tried to resurrect the argument that the original developer never fully relinquished the lots, claiming some hidden easement or contract clause gave the HOA future rights. They provided questionable maps, shaky witness statements from a long-retired construction manager who barely recalled details. It felt flimsy, like grasping at straws. More ominously, one developer testified that Karen had approached him to discuss building a private tennis facility, ignoring the homeowner's existing rights. On our side, we paraded undeniable evidence, official deeds, decades of property tax receipts, statements from multiple county offices verifying that each house was privately owned. We hammered the notion that forcibly removing seniors for a private tennis court was unconscionable and had no standing in law. The seniors themselves testified tearfully about the stress of facing eviction. The courtroom atmosphere crackled with sympathy for these older folks who'd done nothing but retire in peace. Karen herself took the stand. She tried to appear calm, but soon grew combative under cross-examination. She admitted she believed improvements would raise property values, but she struggled to justify destroying homes. Her flustered answers likely sealed the jury's impression that this was pure greed. When final arguments concluded, I spoke about the fundamental injustice. We cannot let an HOA official weaponize questionable documents to uproot the most vulnerable among us. That is not only unlawful, but morally bankrupt. Many observers nodded gravely. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it as simply a land dispute, but it was too late. The jury deliberated for half a day. Tension ran high. Ms. Harris clutched my hand, trembling. By afternoon, the judge reconvened the court. The forepersons stood, reading the verdict. The seniors were the legitimate property owners, and the HOA had no authority to demolish or forcibly rezone their homes. Karen's claim was declared invalid, and the court found evidence she'd knowingly pursued a fraudulent angle, potentially exposing her to personal liability for damages. Thunderous applause broke out. The seniors wept tears of joy. In a blistering final statement, the judge scolded the HOA for letting Karen's crusade go this far. He ordered that any future changes to neighborhood land usage had to be approved with transparency and could not override existing property rights. Karen stood, pale and silent, as the gallery erupted with relief. Ms. Oliver approached the bench in tears, thanking the judge. He nodded solemnly, wishing them peace. Outside, cameras flashed as reporters hounded Karen with questions like, "Why did you want to evict elderly neighbors?" She fled to her car, ignoring them. On the courthouse steps, I made a brief statement. Justice prevailed today. These residents can remain in the homes they rightfully own, free from intimidation. We stand in solidarity with anyone facing unethical property grabs. The seniors clapped. Ms. Harris gave a heartfelt thank you, her voice trembling with gratitude. That evening, a wave of celebration swept Cypress Glade. People congratulated the seniors, dropping off baked goods, offering help to fix up their homes. A sense of unity blossomed, overshadowing Karen's toxic influence. In the following weeks, the question arose, would Karen face further legal repercussions or be ousted from the HOA? Many demanded her resignation. Ms. Whitley led a formal vote, which overwhelmingly removed Karen from her position as HOA president. The board's official statement apologized to the seniors for the stress inflicted, disavowing Karen's actions as not reflective of the community's values. Karen, humiliated, retreated from public view. Rumors said she was listing her house for sale, planning to move somewhere else. A handful of her staunch supporters tried to cry foul, but they were drowned out by the majority who recognized the cruelty in her attempt to displace older folks for a vanity project. Even the developers she courted distanced themselves, fearing negative publicity. Meanwhile, Ms. Harris and the others resumed quiet lives, no longer worried about sudden eviction. I advised them on simpler estate planning, ensuring no future threat emerged. The Harrises personally thanked me with a small backyard dinner, inviting all the seniors I defended. The mood was joyous, conversation lively. At one point, Mrs. Oliver gave me a painting she'd made of a rose garden, her thank you for saving her home. I cherished it deeply. With Karen deposed and the seniors secure, Cypress Glade slowly stabilized. Neighbors once wary of HOA tyranny relaxed, planting flower gardens, updating paint colors without fear of arbitrary fines. Ms. Whitley and the board introduced gentler guidelines, emphasizing community spirit over strict uniformity. Freed from Karen's oppression, the neighborhood found new warmth and closeness. News outlets ran follow-up stories about how the tennis court eviction saga ended. Many praised the seniors' victory as a testament to standing up for one's rights. Some recognized me from previous high-profile cases, calling it a local heroine moment. I took it in stride, satisfied we'd done the right thing. My entire approach to law was about championing the marginalized, and ironically, I found a major battle in my own backyard. Karen attempted to vanish from the scene. She quietly sold her property at a loss, apparently facing potential lawsuits from the seniors for emotional distress, though Ms. Harris said most didn't want to drag it out. They merely wanted peace. A few rumored that Karen's finances took a hit from her legal fees and potential settlement with the HOA for misusing funds. One day, a moving truck arrived, and by morning, her house stood empty. The vacuum Karen left let the neighborhood breathe. The board considered adding a modest recreation area, not requiring home demolition, perhaps repurposing an unused lot near the clubhouse. The seniors supported it, happy to have a place for gentle exercise or small gatherings. It was a testament that improvements could be done ethically, without harming people's homes. During a casual walk, Ms. Harris asked me if I'd remain in Cypress Glade forever. We both laughed, acknowledging my career might pull me to international cases. But for now, at least, I found solace here. You're always welcome, dear, Ms. Harris said. We'll keep your seat at the potluck table. My heart warmed at the sense of belonging, which no fancy tennis court could ever replicate. Months later, Cypress Glade thrived under new HOA leadership, focusing on building real community. The older residents established a seniors social club, hosting weekly teas and game nights at the clubhouse. Younger families joined in, bridging generational gaps. I marveled at how a shared crisis ironically strengthened the neighborhood, forging deeper friendships. One breezy afternoon, a small ceremony took place on the street lined with the once endangered homes. The seniors collectively unveiled a commemorative plaque reading, "Unity through Compassion," celebrating how the community protected these houses and stood against injustice. Ms. Harris gave a short speech, tearfully thanking everyone for backing them in their darkest hour. I felt a lump in my throat as she singled me out. We owe a debt of gratitude to Ms. Natalie Rivers, who championed us with unwavering courage. Polite applause followed, neighbors smiling. Usually, I'm comfortable with public speaking, but seeing such raw gratitude from my immediate community moved me deeply. As the ceremony ended, Mr. Harris gently patted my shoulder. "It's rare you find a hero next door," he quipped. I replied that they themselves were the true heroes, refusing to yield to fear. We shared a quiet moment, absorbing the significance of what had transpired. Karen was gone, the tennis court fiasco lay in the past, and the seniors' homes stood secure. That might have been the end of it, but word of the controversy had spread widely. I started receiving letters from other neighborhoods describing similar scenarios, where an overbearing HOA or unscrupulous developer threatened the vulnerable. Many begged for legal advice. My time in Cypress Glade became an emblem of successful grassroots resistance, and folks wanted to replicate that victory. With the seniors' blessing, I occasionally used their story in public talks, highlighting how everyday citizens can stand up for their rights. The reaction was enormous. Crowds found hope in the example of Karen's downfall. Some interviews labeled me the tenacious suburban attorney. I found that ironic, given I was known more for global human rights. Still, protecting local seniors from being thrown out of their homes was a form of human rights, too. Each time I returned to my comfortable house in Cypress Glade, I felt a wave of calm. The front gardens thrived. No one harassed me about bush trimming or mailbox color. Kids biked freely, seniors strolled the sidewalks. Freed from tyranny, the neighborhood reached a new normal of friendly coexistence. One crisp fall morning, Ms. Oliver invited me and the Harises for tea on her porch. Sipping chamomile, we watched leaves drift from the big oak overhead. Ms. Oliver reflected on how she nearly lost her home, one with so many cherished memories of her late husband. She expressed a quiet awe that a single lawyer's involvement changed everything. "You gave us faith in the law again," she said, her eyes crinkling in a warm smile. I told her in truth, it was the community's unity that triumphed. If the seniors had caved out of fear, or if the neighbors hadn't supported you, no single attorney could fix that. The system can be swayed by public opinion, so your collective stand was crucial. She nodded, acknowledging the synergy. That synergy resonated throughout the entire block. People who once barely knew each other now cooperated to maintain shared gardens, plan celebrations, and check on each other's well-being. Karen's attempt to impose a cold, luxury-driven vision ironically backfired, galvanizing residents to champion empathy and mutual respect. Winter brought mild chill to Cypress Glade. The holiday season approached. The HOA, under new leadership, organized a charitable drive for a local senior center, collecting warm blankets and groceries. The once fractured board found new purpose in fostering a sense of togetherness. I helped coordinate, using my philanthropic connections to boost donations. Karen's name seldom arose, except as a cautionary tale. Don't go full Karen, it never ends well. People chuckled, but the memory of near eviction still stung. The seniors maintained a quiet dignity, never gloating, simply relieved to remain in their homes. Meanwhile, the old Phase 2 tennis court plan vanished. The new board used the budget for smaller improvements, like a community garden and upgraded street lighting. Some nights, gazing from my living room window, I'd see the soft porch lights of the seniors' houses, a reminder that they were safe, and that I, ironically, found a greater sense of personal fulfillment in standing up for justice right in my front yard. My entire career had been about big humanitarian causes, yet this local battle felt just as vital and meaningful. As the new year dawned, local newspapers ran a retrospective piece, Cypress Glade Reborn: How an HOA Crisis Forged a Stronger Community. They interviewed Ms. Harris and me, describing how close the neighborhood came to losing cherished homes. The article portrayed Karen as a misguided figure undone by arrogance and ignorance of the seniors' rights. The piece concluded with a hopeful note about how sometimes adversity unites neighbors more than any planned social event could. In the months that followed, the seniors thrived. Some made minor renovations or painted walls, no longer worrying about condemnation notices. The sense of freedom was palpable. Ms. Oliver adopted a rescue cat, and neighbors joked that she had 9 lives like the cat, having survived Karen's assault on her property. Laughter replaced the tension that once reigned. I remained a steadfast ally, always available if they needed legal advice. Yet mostly, life resumed a peaceful rhythm. I'd come home from international cases or legislative sessions to a quiet house, greeted by friendly neighbors, reminded that justice doesn't only matter in grand arenas. It's equally crucial in preserving the simplest comforts of home. Towards springtime, a swirl of color returned to the gardens of Cypress Glade. The seniors took pride in planting fresh flowers, painting fences, and hosting small potlucks. The board embraced transparency. All major decisions were posted online, inviting open discussion. No more secret maneuvers to displace anyone for questionable community improvements. One day, Ms. Harris approached me with a carefully wrapped gift, a small plaque reading "Defender of Home and Heart." She said it was from the entire group of seniors, their way of commemorating what I did. Touched beyond words, I thanked them, promising to keep it displayed in my living room. "You saved us, Ms. Rivers," Ms. Harris said, eyes shining. I reminded her that we saved ourselves. Indeed, their unwavering refusal to be bullied formed the bedrock of our victory. On my evening walks, families would wave, kids shout greetings. The old houses in the southern section glowed with porch lights, testaments to a successful stand against tyranny. I felt an abiding sense of belonging, knowing that the same drive I used to fight global injustice had protected the people right next door. One morning, I received an invitation to speak at a national HOA conference about ethical governance and respecting resident rights. It was an ironic twist, me, the humanitarian lawyer, now guiding HOAs. But I accepted, seeing it as an opportunity to highlight the Cypress Glade case, how an overreaching official can threaten fundamental housing security, and how a robust community and strong legal defense can prevent such injustice. The speech was well received, reaffirming that such battles happen daily in local neighborhoods, often overlooked by the mainstream. Back home, the seniors carried on with contented routines, unafraid of bulldozers or phony eviction notices. Ms. Oliver's garden blossomed with vibrant roses. The Harises hosted weekend barbecues for new families. The tennis court plan was replaced by a modest multi-purpose field near the clubhouse, installed with everyone's consent, especially the seniors, who gave it a thumbs up. A far cry from Karen's megalomaniacal approach. It felt like closure. A chapter ended with Karen's departure, replaced by a new era of kindness in Cypress Glade. I often reflected on how my involvement might shape the future for other communities, too. Each time a resident from another region emailed me for advice on fighting unfair eviction, I'd share the blueprint from our victory, gather evidence, unify neighbors, leverage legal recourse, and rely on compassion to guide the cause. Today, Cypress Glade Estates stands as a beacon of community resilience. The once looming threat of forced eviction for a private tennis court has receded into memory, a cautionary anecdote about how arrogance and greed can't overpower a united neighborhood backed by legal principle. Freed from Karen's oppressive rule, the HOA thrives on transparency, ensuring no one else can manipulate or displace vulnerable residents. Karen herself disappeared, her scheme forever labeled a failure, overshadowed by public shame. Meanwhile, the seniors remain in their beloved homes. Their joy, their presence, and the neighborhood's sense of unity testify to a victory that was as moral as it was legal. My role as a famous humanitarian lawyer blended seamlessly with the daily life of a caring neighbor, proving that sometimes the greatest battles occur not on global stages, but on the streets where we live. Every so often, I'll glance at the plaque reading "Defender of Home and Heart" and feel a surge of warmth. It's a reminder that justice is about protecting the places we call home, especially for those who can't fight alone. In the end, the seniors' stoic courage and the neighbors' collective support, bolstered by the might of the law, won out over Karen's destructive ambitions. Cypress Glade thrives on that triumph, forging a happy ending in which everyone but the misguided instigator emerges stronger, kinder, and more deeply connected.